Hello and welcome. My name is Chris Punongbayan and I'm the Executive Director of California Change Lawyers. Welcome to this webinar, Can a Social Justice Lawyer Like Me Become a Judge? We're going to get started formally in just a minute or so, but if you want to go ahead and identify yourselves in the chat, where you are, what part of the state you are, your name, and if you have an organizational affiliation, if you're practicing at a nonprofit or wherever you are, go ahead and leave that in the chat. And we'll go ahead and get started in just about 30 seconds. All right, if you're just joining, welcome. We're going to get started momentarily, but if you want to go ahead and leave your name and your pronouns, where you are, and if you have an organizational affiliation, go ahead and leave that in the chat. And just let others know that you're here. All right, welcome. Again, my name is Chris Punongbayan, and I am happy to be leading our conversation today with our esteemed guests for this panel that is being co-sponsored by the California Judicial Council. So if you are interested in becoming a judge in California and you are LGBTQIA, the first in your family to become a lawyer, you practice in a public interest organization, you hold social justice values, you are a Black, Indigenous person of color, you are in the right place. Did you know that only 4% of California attorneys work in nonprofit settings? But that 4% of you are extremely knowledgeable of the issues facing California's indigent populations and would potentially make great bench officers. At the same time, we know that the public interest bar is not highly represented in our California courts. Did you also know that California is about 60% Black, Indigenous people of color, but that only 32% of California's lawyers are, and 35% of California's 1,700 judges? Let me say that again. 60% of the state are BIPOC, but only 32% of California's lawyers are, and 35% of California's judges. Those are some of the reasons why we are here today, to create a space where folks from backgrounds underrepresented on the bench can learn about how to become a judge. When the courts reflect the incredible diversity of the people of California, there is a greater sense of confidence that justice is blind and that litigants will feel that they have due process and a fair chance in court. We are not there yet, but we aim to make progress on it day by day. So our format for this afternoon will be that I will introduce our three esteemed panelists, and then I will interview each of them for about 10 minutes. And then the remaining time will be for your questions. So please go ahead and don't wait for the end to drop any questions or comments that you have in the chat as you hear all of the presentations, and we'll come to them more formally at the end. So we are so honored to have Secretary Luis Cespedes on our panel today. Secretary Cespedes was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom in December 2020 to serve as the Judicial Appointment Secretary in the Office of the Governor. He's been an attorney at law for the law offices of Luis Cespedes since 1982. He also has a long and distinguished career in public service, as well with the California State Assembly and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. In 2018, Secretary Cespedes was named Distinguished Attorney of the Year by the Sacramento County Bar Association. Welcome, Secretary. Our next panelist is Judge Elizabeth Macias. Judge Macias was appointed to the Superior Court of California in Orange County in December 2012 by Governor Edmund Brown. Judge Macias was born to teenage parents who had an elementary school education and limited English speaking skills, but an extraordinary work ethic. She proudly calls herself the daughter of a gardener. She was also the first in her family to graduate from college. After law school, Judge Macias served her community by working for the Federal Public Defender's Office in Santa Ana, California, and she remained a deputy federal public defender until she was appointed judge. She has received numerous awards, but her greatest honor came on June 3rd, 2017, when Santa Ana High School, her alma mater, named their Legal Studies Academy the Elizabeth G. Macias Legal Studies Academy. In 2019, she was recognized by Cal State Fullerton with the Vision and Visionaries Award. Our third panelist is Judge Dean Hansel. He is a California Superior Court judge appointed to the bench by Governor Jerry Brown in 2016, and previously he was a partner in the global law firm of Hogan Lovells PLC. Judge Hansel has held numerous prominent leadership positions on boards and commissions, including the LA Police Commission, the LA Sheriff's Civilian Oversight Commission Working Group, the LA Fire and Police Pension Board, and he was also the co-president of the Los Angeles LGBT Center and co-founder and president of the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, Los Angeles, also known as GLAAD. So welcome to all of our panelists. We're actually going to start with Judge Macias, and we'll see the secretary and Judge Hansel a little bit later. So welcome, Judge Macias. Would you mind please starting us off by telling us why you became a judge? And then you can move into your presentation after that. We'll queue it up to talk a little bit about judicial demographics in California.
Certainly. First of all, thank you to Change Lawyers and Judicial Council for the opportunity. I want to thank also Chris and Carlos, who are instrumental in making certain that we get through today's presentation. In terms of why I decided to apply to the bench, I'm the first generation Mexican American. I was with the Federal Public Defender's Office, and I had become, in need of a challenge in my career. And I started to get involved in the community, and specifically with the Latina Lawyer Bar Association. And, we were talking about the need to have more representation on the bench. We had, for some time, put together an event, which is an event in collaboration with the Latina Lawyer Bar Association and the California Latino Judges Association, and recognizing that some of our Latinx judges did not know one another across counties. So in the course of this, I decided that I was going to submit my application. If we were going to complain about the fact that there were not enough Latinos on the bench, then let's do our part and let's put in our application and see what happens. I will say that there were plenty of people who, during the course of my preparing my application and submitting my application, said that people like me didn't get appointed to the bench because I attended Cal State Fullerton and because I attended California Western and San Diego, neither, Ivy Leagues or well-known, renowned schools. And, I decided that I was going to, see if it was a possibility. And as I told them then, I said, well, the governor doesn't know my story. I'm going to tell him my story and see what happens.
Excellent. I mean, there's so much that we'll get into the Q&A based on what you said, but thank you for sharing your story. And I know you have prepared a presentation that will help us understand kind of what the state of affairs are. So please take it away.
Thank you. And I think this is telling in terms of those that have tuned in today, in terms of why you should seriously consider submitting your application to continue to try and diversify California's judiciary. The Judicial Council's long-range strategic plan for the judicial branch includes as goal number one, access, fairness, and diversity. Among the issues addressed in the goal statement, the council affirms that in order to understand and be responsive to the needs of our court users from diverse backgrounds, the makeup of California's judicial branch will reflect and mirror the diversity of the state's residents. The best practices for Goal 1 also stress the importance of collaborations with other branches of government and justice partners, such as the State Bar and the Jenny Commission, to achieve greater diversity in the bench. Next slide, please. To begin, within this slide, you can see the overview of SB 56 statistics for judicial demographics in 4 major racial or ethnic categories from 2006 to 2020 as compared to the state's population based on U.S. Census numbers in 2000 and 2010. Although you can see the state bench does not yet reflect the population it serves, it has grown considerably more diverse in recent years. As of the 644 judges Governor Brown appointed from 2011 to 2019, nearly 40% identified as non-white or people of color, 44 identified as women, and 6% identified as LGBT. Since taking office in 2019, Governor Newsom's first 78 judicial appointments, half of the governor's judicial appointees have been women, and 56% identified as Asian, Black, or African American, Latinx or Hispanic, or Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander statewide. And as you'll also see when we look at specific counties, the Latinx population tends to have the largest disparity between general population and representation on the bench. Next slide, please. Here you see the number of judges, sitting judges, as of the end of 2020, aggregate for the state, with 1,703 judges self-reporting. The Judicial Council received approximately a 85% response rate from sitting judges in trial courts. You'll notice the various colors. Gray represents white. Orange represents Hispanic, Latinx. Dark blue, American Indian, Native, and so forth. Next slide, please. In these next slides, which show a county by county breakdown by race, ethnicity, based on population and sitting judges, I want you to focus on the non-gray colored segments of each column. The colors represent either the Hispanic, Latinx, African American, Black, AAPI, and American Indian, Native, racial or ethnic group demographics of each county. The gray represents the white population. This slide shows 29 counties in alphabetical order from Alameda through Nevada. Next slide, please. As we transition to this slide, which shows the demographics of sitting judges in 2018 within the same categories, and actually, correction, it's 2020, within the same categories, there's a considerable drop in diversity from the previous slide, which is fairly stark. If we were to toggle back and forth, and I don't know if you can do that, Carlos, you might be able to compare and contrast between the two. Next slide, please. Same thing with the remaining counties from the state, representing Orange County to Yuba County for general population demographics, showing 29 counties. Next slide, please. And now for the sitting judges based on the same demographics. Again, the colors represent either the Hispanic, Latinx, African American, Black, AAPI, and American Indian, Native, racial or ethnic groups. And the gray represents the white population. If you were to toggle back and forth, you'll notice again the disparity. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. This chart compares SB 56 statistics for gender from 2006 to 2020 to U.S. Census numbers for California from 2000 and 2010. Similar to our first slide, based on racial and ethnic categories. You can see that although women make up a little more than half of our state's population, their representation on the bench continues to be substantially lower than their male counterparts, 37% to approximately 63%. Next slide, please. This chart shows the breakdown from men and women on the bench as of December 31st of 2020 statewide. Next slide, please. The next two slides show gender demographics of sitting judges based on counties, with only 14 of 58 counties having achieved gender parity, or about 24%. This chart shows the counties of Alameda through Nevada in alphabetical order. Note that the counties with no dark blue columns are counties with no sitting women judges as of December 31st of 2020. Next slide, please. And here we have the demographics for Orange County through Yuba County. Next slide, please. This chart shows SB 56 statistics for judges who self-reported as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender from 2013 to 2020. Next slide, please. This chart compares SB 56 statistics for gender from 2016 to 2020 for judges who self-reported as veterans or persons with a disability. Now, to be clear, this is not percentages, these are actual numbers. Next slide, please. This chart shows the percentage breakdown for veterans and persons with disabilities on the bench as of December 31st of 2020, statewide. Next slide, please. Lastly, we just want to share with you that Judicial Council project, which is done in collaboration with the State Bar, called Pathways to Judicial Diversity. It is on an online toolkit website for judicial officers to use in their outreach to encourage and inspire interest in a legal or judicial career throughout the pipeline from K through law school education, as well as to educate attorneys from diverse communities about the judicial appointment process. I'm not going to demonstrate the toolkit today, but check out the chat for or the link. Hopefully we'll be able to provide it, either Chris or Carlos, if you can help with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judge Macias. And a reminder that if you have any questions for Judge Macias based on the statistics that she presented, please leave it in the chat and we'll get back to it. One comment here that, oh, here it is, it's being highlighted, that we'll come back to, but it from the Legal Education Access Pipeline, how is it possible to have no women judges in some of these counties? Do you want to take that one really quickly, Judge Macias?
I think it's a number of things, but one is we've got to make sure that we're submitting our applications. That's one issue. I know that Secretary Cespedes may be able to shed additional light on this, but one of the issues is that we continue to encourage people to submit their applications so that we can increase the pool of applicants. So we've got to make sure that we encourage women to submit their applications. In some of these small counties, we also have a small pool of women who are in fact practicing in these counties. So those that are practicing need to submit their applications. We do have a judicial mentorship program, and I think that we'll continue to try and demystify the process so that they can successfully get through and get appointed to these various counties.
Excellent. And Judge Hansel will tell us a little bit about some of those mentorship programs a little bit later in the program. So thank you, Judge Macias. And welcome, Secretary Cespedes.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm very good. So glad to have you with us. Please, one thing that I wanted to share is that we at Change Lawyers believe that appointments are a very important pathway to power as well. And so in addition to judgeships, appointments are really powerful. Can you tell us a little bit about your own story and how you came to be in this very important role for California's judges?
Well, Chris, in many respects, your organization was founded in 1989, and I had been practicing law since 1982, graduating from UC Berkeley, which really is a law school that really teaches people about what your values are. It's almost a public interest more than a law school. Public policy and where the law is going is so critical. But I grew up in a small rural community. Parents were farm workers, and I'm actually a product of very good public schools. Even though we were on the west side, I had teachers very early on. I remember in fifth grade, my fifth grade teacher kind of pointing a finger at my father and mother and saying, in a very respectful way, this young man's going to college. And that's the first time I'd ever heard those words. I didn't even know what college was. So when I grew up, I was fortunate to have other mentors, and that's why mentors are so important. And as I moved along in my career, I had mentors really in government at the highest levels. And I was able, while in college, to go and work back east for the President's Cabinet Committee on Opportunities for the Spanish Speaking. I was working for the Counselor to the President, and that's how I got to the EEOC so early in its early days. When I came back, I went to work in the legislature in an office called the Assembly Majority Services or Consultants, and worked with Congressman Fazio, helped him get elected to the Assembly, and then became a member of his staff. While a member of his staff, I worked with Justice Klein, who was then the legal affairs advisor. And because Assembly member Fazio was on the Judiciary Committee, one of the first, he and Maxine Waters were the first non-lawyers on the Assembly Judiciary Committee. I worked very closely with the Justice Klein on several judicial appointments. And I've been fortunate since that time to work with every judicial appointment secretary up through Justice Jenkins. So it's been a really privileged opportunity. But again, it's big having great mentors and really, again, focusing on helping others advance their judicial and legal careers.
Excellent. And I'm sure our folks will have more questions about your background later in the program. But can you tell us a little bit about what Governor Newsom's priorities are in terms of characteristics that he is seeking for California judgeships?
Yeah, Chris, what I want to do in the interest of time, because this is really so important, I do have some prepared remarks that I want to share that actually the governor is a message he'd like to convey. The governor believes, quote, that judges make decisions every day that affect Californians, end quote. This is precisely why we are dedicated to finding the best and most qualified people to appoint to the California judiciary. The governor wants to appoint lawyers and judges who will soberly exercise their broad discretion, employing diligence and humility in doing so, and who also believe in the governor's motto, California for all. I found it interesting that your mission statement says, quote, build a better judicial system for all Californians. So clearly your vision and your mission are the same as Governor Newsom's. At the outset, in case it has not been clear so far, there is no litmus test for judicial appointments under this governor. Here is why. The governor believes, as we all do, in the rule of law. He sees law as a compact that binds people together in a diverse and democratic republic. The law is, in the end, about people and must serve the people. We are therefore looking for candidates who are intelligent, manifest humility and empathy, demonstrate good judgment, have a reputation for professional excellence, are deeply committed to their community, and who wholly embrace the concept of inclusivity. So let's take one of these, each one. First, the governor values intellect and intellectual curiosity. This does not mean an ability to wrestle with abstract or theoretical academic concepts. It means that the candidate is smart and intellectually curious about the world he or she lives in. Intelligence and intellectual curiosity results in decisions that reflect quote, real world appreciation of how people live their lives in a society governed by the rule of law. We value candidates who have strong legal skills, who are thoughtful and introspective about the implicit bias that can affect their decision-making process. Secondly, humility is perhaps the most important value among other values a judge appointed by Governor Newsom must possess. Humility, as the governor defines it, does not refer to someone who is timid or meek. To the contrary, Governor Newsom is looking for courageous judges who will faithfully follow the law and find the facts without regard to political consequences of their decision. Humility is a crucial value trait for a Governor Newsom appointed judge because, in his view, humility serves to remind public servants, especially judges, that it is an enormous privilege to serve others, particularly when one has the influence and authority the California Constitution affords judicial officers. Judges render decisions that have an economic impact that affect people's lives, their family, child custody, their freedom, and whether or not someone should be rehabilitated or sentenced due to prolonged criminal activity. Humility in Governor Newsom's thesis of the quality that makes good judges counsels one to listen rather than aspire to establish that he or she is the smartest person in the room. A judge who is open to listening to the parties will convey a willingness to be persuaded of the correctness of a party's decision, and in doing so, he or she will head note that what the parties have to say is important to the resolution of the issue before the court. Last, humility helps forge a credibility link between the judge and the litigants, because having been heard, the parties leave court feeling that they received a fair hearing. The governor believes the imperative of humility for judges can be a hallmark of our system of justice, due process, and a fair hearing. Third, the governor wants to appoint well-rounded and interesting people with broad life experiences, like many of you listening. It is well understood that judges inherently bring their life experiences to the bench and that their experiences inform their decision-making. The broader the experience, the better one is able to discern how an individual's life experience influences behavior. Fourth, the governor values diversity. The governor is interested in having the state's judiciary reflect the people who come into court seeking justice. It is thus essential that our judiciary looks like the communities it serves. And one of the most important things that this governor is doing is to promote diversity and transparency. That is why he disclosed all 8 members of our Judicial Selection Advisory Committees, casting aside previous notions that there were, quote, gatekeepers, end quote. As those of you who have been involved in hiring know, that the policy of inclusion, increasing the applicant pool, is the single most important thing we can do to have equal opportunity. Finally, the governor wants to appoint judges who are simply good people. Good people make good judges. Can they relate to people who are different than themselves? Are they empathetic to unpopular litigants or unpopular viewpoints? Do they value equal justice for all, regardless of background? These, then, are the values and hallmarks of the type of candidate the governor is looking to appoint. If you've seen the last 2 sets of appointees we've made, this litmus test can be matched against their distinguished records up and down the state, including very distinguished LGBTQ candidates and candidates who heretofore would never even had a second or third look. The California Judicial Mentor Program, as Judge Macias said, is now statewide. Some of you know, historically, judges have always served as mentors. Now we're going to make that available to everyone. Now, in rural counties, if you take Merced, Kings County, Yuba County, and Madera County, think about that. There's 60% of Latinos in those counties, and none of them are Latinx or Latino. Why is that? We have 0 applicants from those counties. We're trying to get people from Fresno to also apply in Kings or Madera County through the Judicial Mentor Program. That will be our goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Cespedes. That was extremely insightful. There are so many takeaways from the intellectual curiosity, humility, courageousness, credibility, diversity. I think that those values are really appealing and reflect a lot of our listeners today. So thank you for affirming the big picture, but we will get into more specifics.
Yes.
And if I may invite Judge Hansel on to join us. Judge Hansel, welcome. It's so great to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Very good. Tell us, please, your personal story about why you decided to become a judge.
Well, like Secretary Cespedes and Judge Macias, I grew up in a small town also. Mine was in the Appalachian foothills of Ohio. Part of my hometown when I was growing up didn't even have indoor plumbing. And a majority of my high school classmates never went on to college. It was still a wonderful place to grow up with the diversity of it, but I had a secret. And it was a secret that I very carefully guarded, and that was the fact that I was gay. I didn't dare disclose it for fear of being ostracized or perhaps beaten up with it, but it certainly taught me two lessons. One, of course, not to take things for granted and not to make assumptions about others, and also that it helped that, I guess, also being Jewish in a town where nobody was Jewish, that it gave me the sense that I wanted to save the world. In college, I became a civil rights worker in rural Tennessee and would go there relatively frequently. When I went to law school, early in law school, I attended a lecture on the French legal system. And I learned that if you were a law student there, you would go down one of three different tracks: civil, law, criminal, or there was a very small track for people that wanted to become judges. And I decided, had I been in France, that's the direction I would have gone, even I'm not quite sure about the wisdom of a 24-year-old judge, but nevertheless, that was the direction I wanted to go. And I still had this burning desire to give back and to want to do that. My first job out of law school was as an environmental prosecutor for the state of Illinois. It was a wonderful job. I made $14,000 a year and I loved it. I then moved out here and joined the Federal Trade Commission to be a prosecutor handling consumer protection cases, and then went into private practice and tried to be as involved as I could be with pro bono work and other civic work. In fact, one of the most important things I did that Chris didn't mention was I was on the board of Change Lawyers, which was then called the State Bar Foundation. But it's still, for me, I love being a lawyer. I love the problem solving and working with clients, but it just wasn't satisfying enough to me. And I decided, I remembered this lecture I went to and decided I really wanted to become a judge. And so I took the chance on it, and lo and behold received a phone call August 15th. So 5 years ago, when I was in the midst of everything else, from the governor's office and inviting me to join the judiciary. It's been a great experience, and I haven't looked back. I've enjoyed almost every day, not every day, but almost every day.
Thank you for sharing your story. One thing that I can personally attest to is that coming from a public interest background, I really didn't make time to think about this really as an option for myself. And, I wasn't involved in bar organizations. I was just involved at my nonprofit, and that felt like it filled, 150% of my plate. But can you tell us a little bit about what programs that are out there now, whether at LA County Superior Court where you are, or other mentorship programs that are out there, so that if folks are interested, that they can learn about other resources that are out there that may help them along this path?
Absolutely. In the spring, in Los Angeles, with the full support of Secretary Cespedes, we created a judicial mentoring program, and the concept with it was to reach out, have presentations like we're doing today, and to talk with groups of people, and then with individuals as mentors about what it's like to be a judge, to try to demystify the process, get rid of rumors about false barriers that people have, and help to guide people along in the process of it. And as you may have seen in the Daily Journal on July 2nd, Governor Newsom then rolled this out statewide as it is now, in order to try to get people all over the state who may be interested in becoming a judge, but may not know a judge themselves, to really give them the opportunity to hear what it's like, what are the processes, what's not a barrier for people, and then to really help guide people along on a more specific level for doing it. And so far, the results have just been very gratifying.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to now invite all of our panelists back together to join us for a Q&A for the rest of the hour. And so, again, if you do have questions for our panel, please leave them in the chat and we can get to them. Otherwise, I'm just going to start us off with a first question, which is, are civil practitioners who are not at this time engaged in litigation given equal consideration, or are those who are primarily engaged in litigation, such as district attorneys or public defenders or working in big law, favored?
Want me to take that, Chris?
Please.
I anticipate that question because it comes up, and so I want to quote the law because that's always helpful, isn't it? David Jones, the former assembly member, when he was in the assembly, amended Government Code 120 and 1.5. Drew Liebert, who's a dear friend, was the Judiciary Committee consultant and gave me the legislative history. And if you go to Government Code 120.5, subsection D, this is the statute that created the Jenny Commission. It doesn't govern the executive branch, but it governs the California Judicial Commission on judicial nominees, the Jenny Commission. And it says the following: in determining the qualifications of a candidate for judicial office, the state bar, through Jenny, shall, not may, shall consider, among other appropriate factors, his or her industry, judicial temperament, honesty, objectivity, community respect, integrity, health, ability, and legal experience. The state bar shall consider legal experience broadly, including but not limited to litigation and non-litigation experience, legal work for a business or nonprofit entity, experience as a law professor or other academic position, legal work in any of the three branches of government, and legal work in dispute resolution. Now, clearly, what we want judicial officers to know is the evidence code, the rules of civil procedure. You can't, if you don't know what a motion in limine is, learn. Go watch a trial. Engage in pro tem work. I've been a settlement conference judge in Department 59 since 1986. We help settle cases, and it's been a rewarding experience. I also served as a temporary referee, and it was invaluable because those are child dependency cases when we had referees. It's invaluable for those of you to become mediators if you don't have a lot of litigation experience. But what we don't want are folks coming into the courtroom and not being able to handle very serious cases because, as I said earlier, life, liberty, and property are at stake, including dynamics of a family. Litigation experience, though, is very, very broadly defined. We look at it. I had someone who had a 3-month trial, complex Title VII, overcoming motions for summary judgment, and then another 3 trials, jury trials, and every judge that heard this person said they were fantastic. That's 4 jury trials, but they were complex civil. So again, the nature of the trials, the nature of one's work are all factors, but I wouldn't self-exclude yourself because of a limited litigation experience, but make sure that when you apply, you understand what the role of a judicial officer is, because the learning curve is very, very fast, and you don't have time to really learn all the nuances that Judge Macias and, for example, and Judge Hansel talk about.
Thank you, Secretary. this is not a question that's come up, but it's kind of related. And it's based on the fact that many on the call are likely the first in their family to go to law school. Maybe they're the first lawyer that anyone has ever known in their neighborhood. And they may not have any political connections at all. They're not involved in political parties. They are just not part of that universe. Would that get in the way of someone applying to be a judge?
No, I think I'm the perfect example. You know, there's that saying, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know. I think that my appointment back in 2012 proved that to be untrue. First generation Mexican American, grew up here in Orange County, Santa Ana. Had never seen the inside of a courtroom. When I was in law school, I didn't even do mock trial competition because I had my first child, my first year of law school. And I applied straight out of law school to the Federal Defender's Office and was fortunate to have gotten that position. And I was a federal defender for 14 years. I'll tell you what helped me. I worked hard every day to represent my clients to the best of my ability. I walked into the courtroom prepared. I worked hard to make certain that what I filed was top notch. And I was frankly surprised when I decided that I was going to submit my application. And I approached these judges about my interest in submitting my application and receiving their support. So along the way, you will build support, or you have already built support, because of the quality of your work. It had nothing to do with who I knew as much as, you know, my body of work.
Thank you. There is a question here about bar associations. So how important is it for an applicant to be involved in bar associations? And if they have not been involved, will that be held against her?
Well, it's helpful to be involved in bar associations for a couple of reasons. One, most bar associations have a lot of education programs. Two, it's a great opportunity for people to get involved in the community. Is it a deal killer? No. But certainly those of you that are maybe a few years out from applying and thinking, what can I be doing over the next few years? Involvement in or civic organizations involved in bar associations would certainly be a positive. Now, don't despair if you haven't done it and you're about to apply with it. But I understand there are a number of people here that are 10 years or less that are on this call. So I think a lot of this, my comments are really for you and looking at how you can best prepare to be a judge. And I think it would be a great thing to get involved in something like that.
Chris, can I give another perspective?
Yes.
We look at community service as an indication from your undergraduate, your college experience, your law school experience, and your career. We look at it rather broadly. In other words, what is your record of community involvement? But let me just be very clear. We also know that women disproportionately carry responsibilities at home. They have to take care of the children. Most often, they're the people who are preparing the meals. They're running the household. They're running their law firms or their partners or their agencies, and they're doing it all. And so during a period when they're raising families, they may not be in a bar dinner at night. And we will look at that in context, because community service and involvement is broad, because that very woman applying is also in the PTA, making the soccer stacks on Saturday, driving the kids, singing in the church choir, working in nonprofits, you name it. And so again, I would just remember that we look at this very broadly in terms of longevity, but also recognize that there are periods in a woman's life in particular where the level of activity may not be equal to a man's, but that's not going to be held against her. So I want to make that clear. There is implicit bias if you go the other way, isn't there?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Yes.
If I can add just to that, and thank you, Secretary Cespedes. You read my mind, and I know that we share in this. When I applied, I had not been active in Orange County. I'd been active with the Latina Lawyer Bar Association, but otherwise had not, because I have kids and I had a built-in clientele. I was a federal defender. I had people appointed to me. I had a large caseload. And so I was juggling. And I think it's really important that, those of you who are joining us today and sharing this experience, know that that's understood. But I think the other part of it is that I think it's really important that you realize that bar associations are changing. Now there is really a true commitment to community outreach, to doing social programs that maybe were not happening, back when some of the older judges who were on the bench, might not have found an interest in becoming involved with bar associations. So you might actually find something in a bar association that meets your needs in terms of your pro bono work, your community work. So look into that, because the few hours that you do have to give, you might find something extremely fulfilling in a bar association. So don't just look at it as a networking opportunity. Look at it as an opportunity to get involved in your community.
Thank you, Judge Macias. And thank you for those comments, Secretary Cespedes. I think it just is proof positive of the importance of having the right people in the right positions to understand really what's going on, in between the lines, so to speak. So we actually do have a couple people on the call who have applied to be judges. And so could someone please take the question around what is an expected timeline and how is the process typically being vetted?
There is no timeline. And they're vetted by the Judicial Selection Advisory Committees. There's 8, and they're around the state, and their names are now transparent and public for decades. We've had these secret committees, but in 2019, my predecessor, Justice Martin Jenkins, and the governor wisely disclosed them. Look them up, and you can see who's on the Judicial Selection Advisory Committee. I think Judge Macias is on our committee in Orange County, for example. Also, you'll be vetted if we have a relationship with the county bar. The county bar will interview you if there is a relationship. And then obviously the Judicial Nominees and Evaluations Commission, which will send out thousands of questionnaires. Those reports all come to the governor, and we then decide who amongst them who to interview. But again, the process is both lengthy and arduous, so there is really no timeline. I know Judge Hansel may be able to add a little bit more about vetting.
I'm on the LA Judicial Selection Advisory Committee, and we've had people that have come through that had applied quite some time ago. And the one thing I will tell people: don't give up hope.
Exactly.
I have some colleagues. One I can think of who has had a great career. It took 4 years to get through the process of it. Mm-hmm. And once you press send with it, go about your life. Live your life as you would, and who knows, at some point when you are least expecting it, all of a sudden you're going to get a 916 phone call on your cell, and there's Secretary Cespedes on the phone with you. But it's it proceeds as it proceeds with it. So it's there's a there's no normal with all of that.
If I might add, Judge, thank you for your service. We have distinguished members like Judge Macias, but in the Los Angeles, we have former Justice Carlos Moreno, and most recently, Ambassador Vilma Martinez, former President and CEO of MALDEF, joined. You have a wonderful committee chaired by Judge Helen Zukin, who is also chair of the Jenny Commission, and they serve with great distinction, and the reports are quite detailed and very, very helpful. So I hope that's responsive to the question.
And it absolutely is. And I just wanted to make sense of a little bit of the alphabet soup in there and the acronyms, because each of you said out what is often an acronym. So I just want to point it out that there's the Judicial Selection Advisory Committee, or JSAC. Those are
eight of them.
Excuse me, eight.
There are 8 of them around the state.
Around the state. And then Jenny is the Judicial Nominees Evaluation Commission, which is part of the State Bar of California. So a judicial application will be looked at by JSAC and then evaluated by Jenny. So there's many steps involved there, but just in case you've never heard those terms before, that's what
and Chris, thank you. The Jenny, by the way, is statutory and it's mandatory. That's the one that we have to send out under the government code I just cited.
Thank you. I think this question would be for you, Judge Hansel. Is the Judicial Mentorship Program for lawyers who already know judges, or should those with informal relationships with judges pass on the program to make room for others?
Well, I think as long as if you've already applied, then there's not much the mentorship program can do. But if you haven't applied, even if you know judges, you might consider seeking out a mentor as well, because you'll get a different perspective on things. Let me mention, by the way, is if you don't have to do this, and in the process of it, the various bodies that we talked about, we don't know if you've participated in the program or not. It's purely voluntary on your part whether you want to do that or not. It's been great. We've gotten a lot of interest in it, but don't hesitate, even if you know a judge, to seek out a mentor. We'll find a place for you somewhere in the state.
Chris, if I might add, one of the beauties about making this statewide is if you're LGBTQ and you live in Riverside and there are no judges there that you want to go to, you want to speak to somebody of your background, the California Judicial Mentor Program is flexible enough so that you can get a judge in Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego. And then let me just add before I leave, I think it's the first in the nation. My predecessor, the Honorable Justice Jenkins, is chairing the California Judicial Appellate Program, which is a pilot program out of the first DCA. So judges who want to seek elevation to the Court of Appeal can now get a mentor. And we've already had over 10 justices agree to be mentors. And it's remarkable that this has come out. And we hope to have it duplicated throughout the all of the 6 DCAs.
If I can add, Chris, just real quick, I think that it's important to note that the judicial mentorship programs are being established in all counties. Some will be regional, some will be based upon an individual county. The goal is to get people to submit their application. So generally, and I think that it might vary from county to county, but I think generally, if you've already submitted your application, you're not likely to receive a mentor. But if you have not submitted your application, even if you know a judge and you seek a mentor and you are in good standing, you will receive a mentor. And just like Secretary Cespedes mentioned, it's not just the LGBTQ plus community that might be able to seek help from another county, but we're also looking at our affinity judicial associations to pitch in when someone from a small county may be looking at a Latinx mentor who may not have one on that local bench, or someone from the AAPI community, or someone from our African Black Judges Association. They would also be willing to take on someone from a small county where there isn't someone who's African American or Black. So, again, if you're looking for a mentor, we're available.
Wonderful. And we have one really good wrap-up question. There's actually 2, but they're asking for the same thing, that the appointment process is still a little bit confusing. And so is there like a best resource that you would recommend to demystify and clarify the process?
Take a look at the toolkit. That if we can provide the link, I think that would be really great. But I think also if you are thinking about it, make sure that you tune in, because we have a lot of bench bar events where we go through the actual process. And I know that, throughout the state, we're making these presentations. I don't know that there's an actual chart available. I think that's a, very good point, and it's something that we'll keep in mind.
I wanted to pick up on one point. First of all, I think one way to demystify it is to participate in programs like this and get a mentor. And just to make one pitch as well, I want to pick up on a comment that Secretary Cespedes said. There is no one litmus test with this. The goal is to get as broad and as diverse a judiciary as possible. I think we really need it here in order to get the best possible judges. And if you have some imaginary roadblock in your mind, and let me just give you some questions I've gotten. My brother's in prison for armed robbery. Is that a deal killer? Or in college, 25 years ago, I was picked up for marijuana. Is that a deal killer? I'm a Republican. Is that a deal killer? There's a lot of things like that that are, don't let those be barriers for you on it. If you're at all interested, sign up for the mentorship program, and we'll be glad to help walk you through the process of it. But do give this serious attention. We really want more people from the social justice community. As judges, we have Judge Macias and I both have colleagues in our counties that have had that background. They're great judges, and some of whom may have not ever stepped into a courthouse before this, and they make fabulous judges. So please give this serious thought.
Well, we are actually at time, and so I just wanted to thank Secretary Cespedes, Judge Hansel, and Judge Macias so much for your insights. We will be following up with resources that were mentioned in an email after this call wraps up. But please do continue to get involved, and please be involved so that you can make a difference in changing the face of the courts to be more representative of California's great diversity. Thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.